Hi, my name is Stephanie, and today we're going to be checking the checklist. So I thought this would be an interesting thing to try out. A lot of times people look to checklists around autism to see if maybe they can relate to the traits, to see if that makes more sense, because the diagnostic criteria can be very stiff sounding and kind of hard for people to understand and relate to. However, we also know that a lot of these checklists are subjective observations that might not necessarily be signs of autism. One of the first ones, if not the first one, that I ever went over on my channel was the Samantha Kraft unofficial checklist. I believe at the time it was for Asperger's in females. I believe it's now titled Females with Autism, an Unofficial List. So this was created by Samantha Kraft. And today what I'm going to do is compare it to the actual criteria. So what I've used is the technical criteria from the DSM-5, the information around that. So basically in the DSM-5, if you were to open it up and look into it, you have the criteria breakdown, kind of specific list A, B, C, and then there's a couple more pages that go into more depth and explanation. And so I'm using that as well as the extended examples list that I've used before, and I will mark those in my references. So that's what I used to compare it to diagnostic criteria. This is my judgment. You might not necessarily agree that something does or does not fall into that category, so I think it'll be kind of interesting to go over. I'll show you my justifications, and I also want to, when I can, kind of put in maybe the official terms for some of these things that are described in the checklist. As we go through the checklist, we're going to be using 3 different categories. One is having no substantial connection seen to the diagnostic criteria. Then we'll mark in yellow those that don't quite fit specifically the diagnostic criteria, but may be potential inner reasons for criteria that you would see on the outside or are really adjacent to it. And then of course green for those items that are in line with criteria, and I'll also cite kind of where I would say that came from. So let's go through this together. So this first section, section A, deep thinkers, was a bit hard to meet criteria just because it's a tad on the subjective side, and these are not things that are really recognized by the DSM in the scope of autism. A lot of times we're looking at comorbid intellectual developmental delay or delayed speech. So the idea of like a deep thinker, prolific writer drawn to poetry, those types of things aren't going to be really recognized as actual criteria. Highly intelligent, sees things at multiple levels, including her own thinking processes. These types of things really aren't that measurable. Analyzes existence, the meaning of life, everything continually. Then we get to serious and matter-of-fact in nature. I put that one under B1. 7, doesn't take things for granted. Again, that's not really something in there. Doesn't simplify. I put that one under the A1 criterion. Everything is complex. Again, don't have anything for that. 10, often gets lost in own thoughts and checks out. Blank stare. So this could explain A3's quote-unquote absence of interest in others, thus I put it as yellow. Our section B on innocent, we have naive. I put that for A3, honest for B2, experiences trouble with lying, also under B2, finds it difficult to understand manipulation and disloyalty, under A3, finds it difficult to understand vindictive behavior and retaliation, also under A3, and easily fooled and conned, under A3. And these really kind of are describing similar traits within just using different words. Feelings of confusion and being overwhelmed wasn't really a specific thing that I could really say met any criteria. Feelings of being misplaced and or from another planet. I did mark this one as yellow because I feel like it's a likely side effect of criterion A1 through A3. Feelings of isolation, I also marked as yellow for it being a likely side effect of A1 through A3, and I almost marked it green for A3 prefers solitary activities. But I didn't know that that would really necessarily fall under feelings of isolation, just that the person might tend to isolate themselves. Abused or taken advantage of as a child, but didn't think to tell anyone. This I actually marked green under reduced help seeking. This is under the functional consequences of autism spectrum disorder in the DSM-5. And I also marked it as a potential side effect of A3. Section C, escape in friendship, survives overwhelming emotions and senses by escaping in thought or action. So I marked this one yellow because I feel like it could explain A3's absence of interest in others. Escapes regularly through fixations, obsessions, and over-interest in subjects. So this meets, in my opinion, the criteria for B3. Escapes routinely through imagination, fantasy, and daydreaming. This one I marked yellow because I feel that it could explain A3's absence of interest in others. Escapes through mental processing. I feel that that one could explain A3's absence of interest in others as well. So these are things like, we might escape through these things, but on the outside, someone might see a blank stare or not really interested in playing with others, etc. So again, that's kind of yellow's role in this. Escapes through the rhythm of words. I did put that one for B3 because of the interest in the rhythm of words. That would be something that would fall under that criterion. Philosophizes continually. I don't really have anything I can put that under. Had imaginary friends in youth. I put this one yellow because I think it's a likely adaptive technique to cope with loneliness due to the social deficits that are noted in section A. Again, yellow, imitates people on television or in movies. I think this is an adaptive technique for social deficits, again noted in section A. Also, a side note, a lot of people don't like the language like deficits and such. I feel that it is legitimately, like, I have social deficits, but some people feel differently about it. They feel like maybe it's stigmatizing or a pathologizing of, I don't know if that's how you say that word, of autistic traits, etc. However, I'm using the terminology of the DSM-5 and the adjacent documents that I used to look over this. So this way, I also hope that this can help professionals to see how this might relate to the diagnostic criteria, and that they can see maybe how legitimate a checklist is, and you can see that for yourself. Again, this is my judgment against the criteria. You might not necessarily agree with everything I marked. Treated friends as pawns in youth, e.g. friends were students, consumers, members. I put this under A1 and A3 of the criteria. Makes friends with older or younger females more so than friends her age, often in young adulthood. I put this under A3. Imitates friends or peers in style, dress, attitude, interest, and manner, sometimes speech. I put this one as yellow because I feel like it's an adaptive technique for the social deficits that are mentioned in section A. This is a bit difficult because one of the main signs in the beginning for someone to be diagnosed with ASD, of course we're talking usually young children, is their lack of imitating others, because it just doesn't come as naturally. But especially it seems to be in females, tend to be better at masking or camouflaging or whatever term you want to use. So you're going to see almost an intentional studying type of imitation, whereas you might not see that so much in males. But it can get a bit dicey because it looks very contradictory to what the DSM-5 lays out as some major signs for ASD. Obsessively collects and organizes objects. I put that under B3. Mastered imitation. Again, I put that yellow, same as the discussion we just had. Adaptive technique for social deficits noted in section A. That is my opinion. Escapes by playing the same music over and over. I put this under B1 as meeting the criteria, and the idea of doing something over and over and over and fixating, that kind of thing, would fall under the technical term of perseveration. Escapes through a relationship, imagined or real. I don't have anything specific that I feel could really point to that when it comes to criteria. Numbers bring ease, could be numbers associated with patterns, calculations, lists, time, and or personification. I feel that falls under B3. Escapes through counting, categorizing, organizing, rearranging, again through B3. Escapes into other rooms at parties. I marked this one yellow. I feel like it could explain A3's absence of interest in others, although I think this mostly speaks to social anxiety and sensory overwhelm, which is likely what's actually happening. Cannot relax or rest without many thoughts. This could technically fall under anxiety, but I feel like that might just be a bit too adjacent to really say like this meets criteria, so we kind of left that one alone. Everything has a purpose. I don't really have anywhere to put that either under criteria. So section D, comorbid attributes. I thought about leaving this out of the calculation of the percentages of accuracy, but I decided to keep it in because there is a section on comorbidities when it comes to the DSM-5, so I went ahead and kept it in. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, falls under B3, or basically OCD tendencies, to be more specific of why that might fall under B3. Sensory issues, sight, sound, texture, smells, taste, might have synesthesia. I put that under B4. Generalized anxiety, I put this as meeting criteria because it is under the heading of associated features supporting diagnosis in the actual text of the DSM-5. Sense of pending danger or doom. I feel like this more directly relates to anxiety, and for that reason, I did mark it yellow. Feelings of polar extremes, depressed, overjoyed, inconsiderate, oversensitive. It could be related to alexithymia in that they're only noticing those extremes. It could be more an interoception issue, again, like being able to regulate what's going on the inside. It could be just sensory dysregulation of just like these extremes because like that's how the body's dealing with things and how the mind's dealing with things. All of that though is speculation, and so I left that one alone. I don't feel that that specifically meets anything on the criteria list. Poor muscle tone, double jointed and or lacking coordination, may have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and or hypotonia and or POTS syndrome. So I put this as green for the lack in coordination. I have seen poor muscle tone, double jointed, EDS, hypotonia, POTS, etc. anecdotally. Eating disorders, food obsessions, and or worry about what is eaten. This can be ARFID, this can be food obsessions, and so I put this under the obsessions criteria. Irritable bowel and or intestinal issues. Constipation was specifically mentioned in the comorbidity section of the DSM-5, so I went ahead and put this one in green. Chronic fatigue and or immune challenges. Again, I see this anecdotally a lot, but it was not in the criterion, so I did not mark that. Misdiagnosed or diagnosed with a mental illness. Green, because the DSM-5 notes very specifically that there are high rates of comorbid mental illness, especially in adolescence and adulthood. Questions placed in the world. I marked this one yellow because I feel like it's due to the Section A social deficits. Often drops small objects. This kind of is adjacent, in my opinion, to lacks in coordination, so I wasn't 100% comfortable putting it in green. So I put it in yellow. This could be dyspraxia or autistic trait that presents similarly to dyspraxia. If you're kind of confused about that, I have a video on autism, dyspraxia, or both, and it kind of discusses the differences and the similarities, etc. So I'll try to remember to link it whichever way the card shows up, so you can check that out so you kind of understand what I'm talking about. Experiences multiple physical symptoms, perhaps labeled hypochondriac. I agree that this is a thing, it's just not in the list of criteria. Wonders who she is, I marked as yellow. Similarly for the questions placed in world, likely due to the Section A social deficits, and what is expected of her under the A3 criterion. Searches for right and wrong, I put that under B2. This can also fall under an issue with cognitive flexibility because you're wanting that this yes or no, this kind of rigid thinking of this is right, this is wrong, this is how things are, and that speaks to an issue with cognitive flexibility. Since puberty, has had bouts of depression, may have PMDD. I put this under meets criteria because, again, the DSM-5 specifically mentions those. Flicks, rubs fingernails, picks scalp skin, flaps hands, rubs hands together, tucks hands under or between legs, keeps closed fists, paces in circles, and or clears throat often. So I put that one under B1 and B4, and in general this would be stimming. So some type of sensory input or override that someone is doing. Then we have social interaction. Friends have ended friendship suddenly without female with AS understanding why, and or difficult time making friends. I feel that falls well under A3. Tendency to overshare, I put under A1. Spills intimate details to strangers, put that one under A1 as well. Raised hand too much in class or didn't participate in class, I put that one under A3. This next one I marked as yellow for little impulse control with speaking when younger. This is probably an executive function issue with inhibition, and it could potentially relate to A1 and A3, but I didn't feel like it was enough to put it specifically as a meets criteria. Monopolizes conversation at times, put that one right under A1. Brings subject back to self, I put this one under A1 and A3. Comes across at times as narcissistic and controlling, is not narcissistic. I put that one under B2, and I think that was more to the whole controlling thing, controlling the environment, having things the same way, a certain way, etc. Shares in order to reach out, so this might be kind of a weird way of approaching a social situation, so I did put that one under A1. Often sounds eager and overzealous or apathetic and disinterested. This one I put under A1 and or A2. This one I marked yellow, holds a lot of thoughts, ideas, and feelings inside. The reason I marked this yellow is because it could explain A3's absence of interest in others, or it could relate to the reduced help seeking and interest sharing that is mentioned in the DSM-5. Feels as if she's attempting to communicate correctly, put that one under A1, A2, so that's of course your social deficits that we're seeing there. Obsesses about the potentiality of a relationship with someone, particularly a love interest or feasible new friendship. So I feel like this is a likely side effect of A3, difficulty or failure in social situations, friendships, etc. And it could kind of go under obsessions, but because of how specific it is about relationships, I wasn't 100% sure if I could really say that, so I went ahead and put it in yellow. Confused by the rules of accurate eye contact, tone of voice, proximity of body stance, and posture in conversation, I put under A2. Conversations are often exhausting. I feel like this is likely due to the effort in compensating for the Section A social deficits. Questions the actions and behaviors of self and others continually, again, likely due to the Section A social deficits. In green, we have feeling as if missing a conversation gene or thought filter. I put that under A1. Trained self in social interactions through readings and studying other people. I feel like this is likely an adaptive technique for the social deficits noted in Section A. Visualizes and practices how she will act around others. I feel this is an adaptive technique as well. Difficulty filtering out background noise when talking to others. This one's not specifically in the DSM-5 for meeting criteria, but I do believe this could be related to the executive functions of attention or inhibition and an issue with sensory gating, which I feel makes it relevant, but again, it doesn't technically meet criteria. Has a continuous dialogue in mind that tells her what to say, how to act when in a social situation. Again, feel like that's an adaptive technique. Sense of humor sometimes seems quirky, odd, inappropriate, or different from others. I put this one under both A3 and B2 as possibilities. As a child, it was hard to know when it was her turn to talk. A1, A2. Finds norms of conversation confusing. A1. Finds unwritten and unspoken rules difficult to grasp, remember, and apply. Put that under A3. This next section is finds refuge when alone. Feels extreme relief when she doesn't have to go anywhere, talk to anyone, answer calls, or leave the house, but at the same time will often harbor guilt for hibernating and not doing what everyone else is doing. So I marked this yellow because I feel like this relief is likely due to the avoidance of high demands in compensating for Section A social deficits. The guilt is likely from not being aware of reasons for social exhaustion due to compensation, and again, that need to attempt to fit in and not meeting those standards. One visitor at the home may be perceived as a threat. This can be even a familiar family member. I don't have anything that I can really correlate that to, as well as this next one, knowing logically a house visitor is not a threat, but that doesn't relieve the anxiety. Again, I don't really have anything criteria-wise for that. Feelings of dread about upcoming events and appointments on the calendar. Again, this one I marked in yellow because it's likely due to the amount of energy and vigilance required to compensate for Section A social deficits, and it may potentially apply to the B4 sensory issues and executive function difficulties. Knowing she has to leave the house causes anxiety from the moment she wakes up. I put this one as yellow because, again, it's likely due to those Section A deficits. Now, all the steps involved in leaving the house are overwhelming and exhausting to think about. This one's not really specific to DSM-5 criteria for ASD, but it's likely due to issues with executive function in the areas of planning, attention, and initiation. She prepares herself mentally for outings, excursions, meetings, and appointments, often days before a scheduled event. Put this one as yellow because I feel it is an adaptive technique for the social deficits in Section A. OCD tendencies when it comes to concepts of time, being on time, tracking time, recording time, and managing time. Could be carried over to money as well. I put this under B2 and B3. Questions, next steps, and movements continually. I put this one in yellow because I feel that it is a likely side effect, again, of Section A social deficits. Sometimes feels as if she is on stage being watched, and or a sense of always having to act out the right steps even when she is home alone. So again, I've marked this yellow. I feel that that's likely a side effect of Section A social deficits. It could also be a B3 issue of being overly perfectionistic and or personal and outside pressure to adhere to the neurotypical standards without knowledge of why this doesn't come naturally. Telling yourself the right words and or positive self-talk, CBT doesn't typically alleviate anxiety. CBT may cause increased feelings of inadequacy. I did not have anything that really would fit that criteria-wise. Knowing she's staying home all day brings great peace of mind. Again, very similar to the other ones. Yellow because the relief is likely due to the avoidance of the high demands for compensating Section A social deficits. Requires a large amount of time or alone time. I feel like this needs to be yellow because it could fall under A3, prefers solitary activities, but it's more likely to be an effect of compensating for Section A social deficits, and B4, sensory overwhelm. Feels guilty after spending a lot of time on a special interest. So I actually split this one. The special interest does fall under B3. Feeling guilty about spending time on it, however, is likely a side effect of the expectation of meeting social norms, which autistic people don't tend to do. Uncomfortable in public locker rooms, bathroom, and or dressing rooms. This one didn't necessarily fit criteria, but is probably really social anxiety and sensory issues here. Dislikes being in a crowded mall, crowded gym, and or crowded theater. Again, social anxiety, sensory issues, but they don't really meet criteria. Section G, sensitive. So sensitive to sounds, textures, temperature, and or smells when trying to sleep. So sensory sensitivity falls under B4. Adjust bedclothes, bedding, and or environment in an attempt to find comfort. Again, sensory sensitivity, B4. These next several ones I can't really put to any sort of criteria, and this is kind of where that overlap between HSP and ASD and like the confusion that happens. I feel like this is one of those areas. So we have dreams or anxiety-ridden, vivid, complex, or precognitive in nature. And this isn't the only list that kind of feels like autistic people might have like special gifts in the supernatural kind of thing, which I know people have opinions on, but it is noted frequently. However, again, that's really not in the DSM-5. Highly intuitive to others' feelings, highly empathetic, sometimes to the point of confusion, takes criticism to heart, longs to be seen, heard, and understood. Now that one, I did say that it was a likely side effect of being different, but it's a little too broad in my opinion, because like anyone wants to be heard and understood, I feel like. So I just didn't feel like it really met it. You might disagree on that call. Questions if she's a normal person. Yellow because it likely is a side effect of being different, and again, Section A social deficits. Highly susceptible to outsiders' viewpoints and opinions. Yellow again. It's likely an adaptive technique for the social deficits in Section A as an effort to fit in. Has been unconsciously taught that everyone else is understanding things that they don't, and thus others are right. This kind of concept. So that might explain that, but it doesn't technically meet a written out criteria. At times adapts her view of life or actions based on others' opinion and words. Basically exactly the previous one, reasoning wise. Recognizes own limitations in many areas daily, if not hourly. Don't really have anything for that. Becomes hurt when others question or doubt her work. This could potentially fall under B3's overly perfectionistic, but the broad heading is not highly supportive of the expanded guidelines that note this specifically, and that's why I did not put it. So there are extra examples that align with the DSM very closely and help people to understand more, but because that one kind of was by itself and it didn't really, in my opinion, make a whole lot of sense under that category, I just don't feel that that's strong enough to put it under as meeting criteria. Views many things as an extension of self, again, not in the criteria. Fears others' opinion, criticism, and judgment, again, put this one as yellow. Section A social deficit side effect. Dislikes words and events that hurt animals and people, collects or rescues animals, often in childhood, huge compassion for suffering, sometimes for inanimate objects or personification, sensitive to substances, environmental toxins, food, alcohol, medications, hormones, etc. All of that, I really don't have anything specific to point to in the DSM-5 as meeting criteria. Tries to help, offers unsolicited advice, or formalizes plans of actions, I feel falls under A3. And then it questions life purpose and how to be a better person, seeks to understand abilities, skills, and or gifts, don't have really anywhere on the criteria. And we have sense of self, again, so we're probably doing a lot of speculation at this point. Like, this might explain why you see something on the outside, or it might be a side effect of a known criteria, but it's kind of hard to put more subjective things into a list. So feels trapped between wanting to be herself and wanting to fit in. I didn't really mark that one. Imitates others without realizing it. I put this one again under an adaptive technique for social deficits. So that one's yellow. Suppresses true wishes, often in young adulthood. Put this under yellow. Maladaptive technique for social deficits in section A, and could also be related to reduced help seeking and interest sharing. Not 100% on that though. Exhibits codependent behaviors, often in young adulthood. Again, I feel this is a maladaptive technique for social deficits in section A. Adapts self in order to avoid ridicule. Again, adaptive technique for social deficits noted in section A. Rejects social norms and or questions social norms. This actually does fall under A3. Feelings of extreme isolation. This one's likely due to the section A social deficits. Again, feeling good about self takes a lot of effort and work. I didn't feel that was close enough to be considered adjacent. Switches preferences based on an environment and other people. Marked yellow for a maladaptive technique for social deficits noted in section A. Switches behavior based on environment and other people. Again, it marked it yellow for an adaptive technique for social deficits in section A. Didn't care about her hygiene, clothes, and appearance before teenage years and or before someone else pointed these out to her. I had trouble with this one. I have it unmarked right now because it could potentially fall under A, but how specific it is about someone telling them or whatever, I just feel like I couldn't put it somewhere, so I didn't. But you could disagree on that one for sure. Freaks out, but doesn't know why until later. So this could be B2's excessive resistance to change, which would be an issue with cognitive flexibility, or it could be a delay or difficulty in processing emotions and other stimuli, but it wasn't close enough in my opinion, so I put it as yellow. Young sounding voice falls under A2. Trouble recognizing what she looks like and or has occurrences of slight prosopagnosia, which is difficulty recognizing or remembering faces. There are no criteria that align with that. Feels significantly younger on the inside than the outside, perpetually 12. Again, not necessarily something that's on our criteria list. Confusion, had a hard time learning that others are not always honest. Put that under A3 and B2. Feelings seem confusing, illogical, and unpredictable, selves and others. Confuses appointment times, numbers, and or dates. Expects that by acting a certain way, certain results can be achieved, but realizes dealing with emotions, these results don't always manifest. I didn't put any of those under anything. I feel like the last one could be really close to something else, but I just didn't feel it was close enough. Spoke frankly and literally in youth, falls under B1. Jokes go over their head, falls under B2. Confused when others ostracize, shun, belittle, trick, and betray. I feel like that falls under A3. These next ones I don't have a section for. Trouble identifying feelings unless they are extreme, so that's probably due to alexithymia. Trouble with emotions of hate and dislike. Feel sorry for someone who has persecuted or hurt her. Personal feelings of anger, outrage, deep love, fear, giddiness, and anticipation seem to be easier to identify than emotions of joy, satisfaction, calmness, and serenity. I don't have a good understanding of why that is. Difficulty recognizing how extreme emotions, outrage, or deep love will affect her, and challenges transferring what has been learned about emotions from one situation to the next. Situations and conversations sometimes perceived as black or white. So that's a cognitive flexibility issue and falls under B2. The middle spectrum of outcomes, events, and emotions is sometimes overlooked or misunderstood with the all or nothing mentality. I feel like it could potentially fall under rigid thinking. I just didn't think it was close enough. because of the specificity. So sometimes these items are so specific that I'm not really sure if I can say that that specifically meets the criteria. So yeah, that's kind of, you might disagree with me on those, but that's just how I felt about it. A small fight might signal the end of a relationship or collapse of the world. I put that one yellow as a potential side effect of A3, difficulty with friendships and relationships. This next one, it may have been a bit of a reach to mark as yellow. A small compliment might boost her into a state of bliss. Potential side effect of common social rejection due to social deficits was my reasoning. Words, numbers, and patterns. These are better recognized in the DSM-5 criteria. Likes to know word origins and/or origins of historical facts / root cause and foundation. That falls under B3. The next 4 don't really fall under anything. Confused when there's more than one meaning or spelling to a word. High interest in songs and song lyrics. Notices patterns frequently, which I'm surprised because I feel like that's a common thing people talk about. Remembers things in visual pictures. Remembers exact details about someone's life. I feel that falls under B3. Has remarkable memory for certain details, also B3. Writes or creates to relieve anxiety. I marked this one yellow because anxiety is a recognized sign due to high comorbidity, but specifically the whole writing and creative part is subjective, so someone might do something else to relieve their anxiety. I don't feel like that particular thing is going to hit the mark as a criterion. Has certain feelings or emotions toward words and/or numbers, falls under B3. Words and/or numbers bring a sense of comfort and peace akin to friendship, under B3. I excluded the optional EF and MS section because they were not directly indicated, are considered to be optional, and it's mostly about executive function and motor skills, etc. So I just went ahead and omitted that from the overall number. So after all of this, my personal assessment, my reasoning I've shared in this video, this is how the Samantha Craft unofficial checklist ranks against specifically the DSM-5 criteria. 32.9% or 53 items had no substantial connection seen in the diagnostic criteria. 29.8% or 48 potential inner reasons for outside observations that meet criteria or were very highly adjacent to criteria. 37.3%, 60 items were in line with criteria. So a total of 67% of the items were indicated as either directly meeting the DSM-5 criteria or were highly adjacent. Due to my personal categorization of the checklist against the DSM-5 criteria, I'm finding this list to be medium-high in accuracy, and that's also taking into consideration some of the other things that are well known to be autistic things that aren't necessarily in the DSM-5. I think this can be useful for professionals to kind of find out more about the perspective of their client as well as a diagnostic aid, and hopefully breaking this down and comparing it to the DSM-5 can help some people kind of score against it, if that makes sense. Obviously, it's not specifically a diagnostic tool, but it could be screening and a diagnostic aid. I think it's useful. I don't think it's 100% accurate. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found this interesting or informative. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and drop a like and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you agree with my assessment and the comparisons against the DSM-5 criteria? Are you surprised by the percentage outcome that I came to the conclusion of? Did it help you to see that some things might fall under particular categories, etc.? Let me know. What do you think? If you're interested in more autism-related content from me, you can go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I try to upload every Thursday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. Thank you to everyone who supports me here on YouTube as YouTube channel members, through Ko-fi, and as patrons on Patreon. And a special thank you to my Spinny Stimmy tier patrons, Philip Noah, Jack Varney, and Snowbird. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!